Whether it's a hot time in Florida or a rainy night in Georgia,
looking for trouble?
It's the perfect time for the TCBCast, an unofficial Elvis fan podcast.
Oh, yes, sir. Good to see you go from. Just glad to bring you the hottest thing in the country, real hot and blue, coming to WHB in Memphis, Tennessee.
Welcome to TCBcast, an unofficial Elvis Presley fan podcast. I'm Justin Gosman.
And I'm Beck Wiles. No, wait. I'm Olivia. No, I'm Ryan Drosty. Actually, no. I'm Gurdip and Justin.
How's it going?
There's too many. It's a rolling cast of characters.
Yeah.
I get confused. I don't know who's coming, who's going.
Exactly. So you're back this week. We have a...
I'm back this week, did you say?
No, I said you're back. I mean, you could also be back this week.
I thought that was a slip of the tongue on purpose. Yes, I'm back. And I'm back.
I
have horrible taste in music. And I picked the worst of the worst when it comes to Elvis music. There's a shot across the bow for her.
Anyway, we are. How's things going this week?
Going well. Well, just, typical busy. We did record something.
Yeah, we've got a lot going on. In fact, on the Patreon, finally the episode, by the time this goes out, will be up. The TCBCast Jukebox that you and I did, that Olivia and I mentioned last week. And then also got out the TCBCast After Dark on Jimmy Ellis, Orion. So that's finished. It's just a lot of content lately.
Yes, for sure. But there was news that came, so that's why we're dropping this mini episode, I guess.
Yeah, and we're sort of... we were planning on kind of taking a 1 week kind of mini break before we have a big movie episode coming up, so I'm trying to prep for that. We're doing Girls. But some gigantic news dropped that we couldn't avoid, and figured now was as good a time as any to talk about. So before we go any further, do quickly want to mention and thank our new patrons over at patreon.com/TCBcast. Thank you to Dennis Bryan and Scott Dayvault for joining up over there. And then I do have a couple really short listener feedback emails as well, if we want to do those.
Let's do it.
Yeah. First one comes from George May. And actually, it's interesting. Both of these emails are related to the topic that you and I did, which Elvis songs would we erase?
Oh, cool.
And we were sort of... I think we were both surprised by the feedback that we saw across the board generally, just comments. People were much more receptive to that episode than I think we were thinking they might be.
Yeah.
But George wrote in to say, Dear TCBcast, I loved the 5 songs you would erase from each decade episode. My list of songs overall, instead of by decade, would just be Life, Don't Cry Daddy, What Every Woman Lives For, My Boy, and the worst of them all, in my opinion, now that I've heard it a few times, Barefoot Ballad. I was really surprised at some of the results of the lowest played songs on Spotify. I've always really enjoyed Faded Love, and Elvis Country has always been my favorite album. And I was also surprised that Justin does not care for It's Your Baby You Rock It when he and Beck discussed it on the Nashville Sessions episode. Another great couple episodes, I might add, as it has always been one of my top Elvis songs. I always thought that the instrumentation was top-notch on it, and Elvis seems engaged with that one, but like you all say, everyone has their own taste. It's one of the things that makes the world fun and interesting. Thanks again for all the listening enjoyment that you bring us each week. George May.
Yeah, everybody does have their own taste, like you might not. Not every song is his latest one, which is universally loved.
Do you,
I doubt. I think there's probably people that don't like that song for some bizarre reason.
What do you think of his list of Life, Don't Cry Daddy, What Every Woman Lives For, My Boy, and Barefoot Ballad?
I don't get Don't Cry Daddy, because that's a pretty good song. It's not one of my favorites, but there's nothing wrong with it. And when it comes on, I don't change it. But the others I can kind of agree with. What do you think? I have
noticed there are some Elvis fans who really don't like that Mac Davis songs tend to be very
sappy,
syrupy. Saccharine. The sentimentality, I think, brushes up against this idea that a lot of Elvis fans have of the uber masculine image of Elvis. Yeah. It's
look at Sam Phillips; he didn't like Memories.
Right. So, But as we know, Elvis did a ton of really vulnerable music throughout his entire career, all the way back to Sun Records.
Yeah,
So,
he was a fan of everything.
absolutely. Next email for this week comes from Gary Q. Gary writes in to say, "Hi guys, had the rare pleasure of listening to the latest episode when it dropped and just wanted to say I really enjoyed the Elvis Songs We'd Erase episode. It was a really fun episode, especially when you guys disagreed on some selections. Some of your choices I definitely agree with, but I cannot agree with Gurdip choosing Almost in Love. Sorry, Gurdip. Personally speaking, I've always loved that track, and I always thought that song and I Need Somebody to Lean On are very underrated and understated songs. I wish Elvis had recorded an entire album of songs in those styles. A few songs I would gladly erase are Yoga Is As Yoga Does, Confidence, Barefoot Ballad, Old MacDonald, Hey Jude, Miracle of the Rosary, He's Your Uncle Not Your Dad, My Desert Serenade, and It Is No Secret What God Can Do. And if I may, I wanted to just throw another idea out there for a future topic for an episode. Occasionally, I'll hear a song by another artist and wonder what might have been if Elvis had recorded a version of it. So I thought I'd suggest a future episode based on that premise. What songs by other artists do you think Elvis could have done a great cover of by reinterpreting or revamping them? They could be songs by artists from his own era or earlier, or they could be songs from the 1980s onward that might have been appealing or meaningful to him that he could have knocked out of the park if he had lived. Obviously, it's a totally subjective topic, and we can only speculate, but I just thought I'd suggest that as a topic if you guys feel like doing another fun, lighthearted episode in the future. As always, thanks again for the time and dedication you put into bringing us these shows. Keep on TCBing. Best regards, Gary.
Yeah, I agree with Gary. Even the Almost in Love, I recognize that it's not a bad song, but for me it just resonates because of when I was younger, I just always didn't like it, and there's no rhyme or reason. Like, people seem to want to figure out why I do what I do. there's zero rhyme or reason. I zig and zag, haphazardly all. I can't explain it. So yeah, I know that's not a bad song. It's just when we approached that list, I made it personal, where I think you were more objective with your choices. So that's the difference. But the topic that he was saying we should maybe do, I have a bunch of songs that I wish Elvis would do, and that's actually a good idea. Like, right off the bat, I can think of It's All in the Game, because we just talked about it, but that would be an amazing song that Elvis would have done. And another one that I really think he would have been great at is It's Only Make Believe, the Conway Twitty song.
Yeah.
Excellent. If you want to hear like a kind of Elvis-y vocal on that, you can check out the duet that Ronnie McDowell did with Conway Twitty, I think in the 80s, of It's Only Make Believe. So you can kind of get, obviously he doesn't sound like Elvis, but that kind of Elvis-y vibe he does put off on that song. So check that out.
They think you really care, but myself I can't deceive. I know it's only make believe. My one and only prayer is that someday you'll care. My only prayer will be someday you'll care for me, but it's only make believe.
I would also I'd also throw on It's Only Make Believe. If you want to hear, even if you don't pay attention to the vocals, if you pay attention to the band on the Roy Hamilton version of It's Only Make Believe, it's the Memphis Boys. Like, it was recorded at American Sound at the same time as Elvis's sessions. So It gives you a good, like, sort of idea of, like, well, if maybe Elvis and Chips had cut a version of it, maybe they would have gone for an arrangement sort of similar to Roy Hamilton's on that.
Yeah, for sure. Whereas Ronnie McDowell was kind of doing what he thinks Elvis would have done, the version that Elvis could have cut in the late 60s, I think would have been different. It would have been more akin to Roy Hamilton.
Definitely. Yeah, in terms of ones for me, oh man, I would have to sit and like come up with a list, because there's so many that I've thought of over the years. There was definitely one that I had heard recently that kind of gave me. You kind of have to be almost in the right sort of frame of mind to go with it. But there's a Teresa Brewer song called "A Tear Fell" that she did in the 50s. I think Elvis could have interpreted fantastically. Yeah. Like, I think it would be probably closer to something like "I Need You So" or something. But when you put it in that sort of frame of mind, it starts to like sort of come together in your head. Like, it's much more bluesy. You could imagine Elvis taking it.
The teardrops that you stepped on as you danced across the floor were crushed like my poor heart was when you walked out of my door. A tear fell when you told me that the flame in your heart died. Darling, have I lost you like these teardrops from my eyes?
So that's for me one.
I mean, that's not even far from it, because he did cover one of her songs way back in the day.
Yeah. So, yeah, great suggestion and great emails. Thank you for that. So, for our main topic, there's new Elvis music.
There is. Well, it's not new, but it's one that not a lot of people have heard of.
Yeah, so we have now from Memphis Recording Service an announcement that happened the day before that they released this and started accepting orders for the physical version of it. The partial concert audio from November 22nd, 1956 in Toledo, Ohio. And then it was also uploaded by a fan named Greg, who had also acquired the tape and was, as I understand it, trying to work out a deal with one label or another. Memphis Recording Service moved ahead with their release, and so Greg threw it up on his YouTube channel. Greg put it out freely. It's basically the unedited audio. When you listen to the Memphis Recording Service version, as we'll kind of talk about, there's a lot of processing on their version, and they've edited it in some ways. So, it's definitely interesting to have newly discovered Elvis live recordings from the 1950s in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to blow your mind. It's like if you've heard him on concert in the 50s, you kind of got an idea. But it's still cool to hear an audio that you never heard of before Elvis performing, because there's always little differences, right? Especially in the 50s of songs that he did. But what's the background exactly? Like the DJ who interviews Elvis in this, because it's very short. It's like, what is it? 3 songs and then intro, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Is he the one who had the tape initially?
Yep. It's a disc jockey by the name of Ron Ross, who worked for WOWO Radio in Toledo, Ohio. Sure. And he, being a member of the press, was able to get an interview with Elvis. It's a very short, almost haphazard kind of interview.
Hello, WOWO. How are you?
How are you? Welcome to Toledo.
Thank you, sir. Nice being here.
Fine. What do you think is your favorite record that you've made so far, Elvis?
Well, the one I like was "Don't Be Cruel."
Which one?
"Don't Be Cruel." I like "Don't Be Cruel" better than any record I've ever
That's
made.
been the biggest color for you?
Yes, sir. It's been my biggest one so far. "Love Me Tender" is not too far behind it, but.
Wait a minute! Don't bite my arm, Katie.
You get this kind of reception every place you go now, or you get autograph stickers like this?
Well, I don't get lonely.
You don't get lost, that's for sure.
Yes, I'm picturing, because I listened to the audio, I'm picturing Elvis walking in, and he just walks up to Elvis while there's like pandemonium going around. And he's like, Elvis, can you say something for our listeners to WOWO? And Elvis is like, hello, WOWO. Because he's like, what is this? But he's still very nice. He seems pleasant, which is good.
Yeah, definitely. It's nice to hear. But yeah, so I believe that he took that tape recorder just to the show as well.
That's right. So yeah, the family, I guess, still has the tape of it, which they didn't release, but MRS got their hands on a copy. They fixed up the audio a bit. Some people probably will say to the detriment, but I mean, it does sound clear, which is fine, which is good.
Yeah, definitely. You know, when you listen to the concert portion of it, which there's, as you mentioned, there's an introduction, and if you listen on the raw audio that Greg uploaded, it's very quiet, very kind of in the background. You really have to crank the audio up. Obviously, MRS has done a lot of audio processing to sort of pull that out so you can hear it a little clearer. And then there's 3 songs. There's Heartbreak Hotel, Long Tall Sally, and then Don't Be Cruel, which comes in about partway through the song, around the word "The Future Looks Bright Ahead," and then that continues to the end of the song.
Where do you think the DJ was positioned? Do you think he was on the edge of the stage?
I don't think he was
at
on
the bottom?
He might have been a few rows back.
Oh, okay, that far you think?
Yeah, because clearly he's some measure away from any of the speakers.
Yes.
You know, because he's not getting like full, like, hey, the recorder's right next to the speaker.
Yeah, this is not Elvis in Vegas in '56.
No, and this is definitely not a soundboard recording either. This is definitely the definition of an audience recording.
And he's describing what's going on as well.
Yeah, so that's one thing that makes this tape kind of interesting is through the performances, there is narration where he describes what Elvis is doing. I assume for what would have been a radio story, news story about when Elvis, you know, like Elvis just came to town. Here's what he did, and here's what was happening as he went on stage. In hindsight, what that does is that obviously it covers up the music. So as a listening experience, you're not getting like just raw Elvis music in the middle of it. There's talking over the top of it. Now, the Memphis Recording Service has, through modern digital technology, separated and removed the voice in certain parts, like when it's over the song.
All those screams coming momentarily. That's just the time when he shrugged his shoulder. Each movement, rolling his leg, taking his particular Elvis stances here as he sings.
This is where it gets into like kind of the interesting thing where like I was trying to think of how to describe like what MRS has kind of done because it's very noticeable artifacting in there. But I'm glad that they did it in the sense that you do get a sense for the flow of the song all the way through from beginning to end. But to me it's sort of like I was thinking about. I've actually been recently reading a lot about Leonardo da Vinci and old works of art and things like that. And I was thinking about like an artist's restoration of a painting.
Right.
where it's like, you know, they've got holes and tears in the art that they have to like fill in and sort of cover up, take off the old varnish, put on the new varnish, and put it in a new frame. That's sort of what MRS has done. Like it's an artist restoration of a painting, which in its way is sort of a work unto itself that kind of has to be viewed subjectively. And I think that there will definitely be some folks that will go, well, this does sort of present it as like not a real historical document of like, here's what the original tape was.
Sides.
Yeah.
It's just some people are like, you're rooting the integrity of the original recording, and others are like, well, no, I want to hear it, so I want to see. It's almost like that whole, remember there was a issue a while back when films were being released on Blu-ray and they were getting rid of the artifacting, the actual film, like the little
the grain,
like the grain, that's it, the grain, and they were smoothing it out for Blu-ray releases, and some people were up in arms. They're like, oh, you're ruining the integrity of the original film.
Because you remove the detail.
Yeah,
by doing that,
other
you sort
people
of
were like, "Oh, it's so clean! It looks so nice."
Right. It's very subjective. It's totally subjective as to whether you like it, and I think it is worthwhile to have it as a listening experience for hearing the Elvis audio, the MRS version. But I'm glad as well that Greg uploaded the version
so
with the
people can
original.
compare, and it kind of settles that whole thing. People have both versions here.
Now, one thing that I thought was kind of interesting, because in terms of the history of this show, this was at the Toledo Sports Arena, and on Alan Hansen's Elvis History blog, he has an entry about the show that I thought was really interesting. He points out that there's this point of contention with the local Toledo newspaper in the days following the concert, because apparently the writer of the article sort of painted this picture of how the crowd was coached to scream. And then naturally Elvis fans defensively wrote in and said, well, we weren't coached. We were just told to give him a big welcome. And then Elvis was the reason why we were screaming, not because we were coached. Well, now that we have that audio, you can actually kind of hear why, you know, a cynical newspaper writer would think that they were coached, and why a teenage fan maybe wouldn't think that they weren't. Because the MC comes out and does say, like, oh, I'm here to represent Toledo, and says something in the middle there that's sort of muddled. It's very quiet, but he basically prompts the crowd to give this really loud scream before Elvis walks on stage. And then afterwards he says, okay, now remember that. That's the way it's going to be.
I say 1, 2, 3, let's really hear it, and that's the way I want to hear it when I have to figure out. Okay, let's really hear it. Let's play everything down, open your mouth. 1, 2, 3, let's hear it! Okay, now remember that, that's the way it's going to be.
How's what going to be? That sounds like coaching, you know, which we know coaching is not needed, because elsewhere Elvis, you know, there are plenty of Elvis recordings where he draws that reaction on his own merits. But you can see why a newspaper writer at the time who hadn't gone to other Elvis shows would think like, well, this is just a show they're putting on. They don't really get it, you know, it's just fake, you know, or something like that.
It's no different than when you hear Elvis introduced in TV shows where let's give a big reception to Elvis Presley, and then he comes aboard. It's essentially that, no?
Yeah. I
give
just
a
thought
big
it was
hand for blah blah blah.
I thought it was interesting that you have this historical debate at the time that we can now, with the audio, go back and look and see. Well, I can see both sides of where someone who didn't quite get Elvis and maybe sort of look down their nose at him might think that based on the context clues, and where a fan would just be like, yeah, we were going to scream no matter what.
yeah. I mean, I don't think Elvis needed. This is the late '56.
Yeah.
Did he really need luck getting cheers? I mean, come on. Was he just on the Ed Sullivan? His film it came out yet or no? I can't remember.
Love Me Tender?
Yeah,
that had come out like a week prior.
Okay,
so it was.
One thing I was going to tell you. Sorry. One thing I was going to tell you, did you notice something? This is interesting. I don't know if anyone's pointed this out. Elvis does Don't Be Cruel, but this is the first time that we get to hear Elvis do his version of Jackie Wilson's, because he had gone to Vegas in early November saw the way Jackie performed it, and then he goes and what the recording we had early December tells them the $1 Million Quartet that he saw Jackie Wilson do "Don't Be Cruel," and we noticed that in the Ed Sullivan performance he does it like Jackie Wilson. But this predates that because this is after Vegas when he sees him, but before the $1 Million Quartet. And if you listen closely, he is doing the Jackie Wilson style, even that ending, that big ending as well. So this is that's very interesting. I don't know if you picked up on that.
Yeah, it just reinforces what we already knew because as an example, we not only have him talking about it in the $1 Million Quartet, we have the appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show. We also have the Louisiana Hayride performance from December, a month later. Yeah. And so this just goes to show that Elvis incorporated that into his set list pretty quickly. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah.
Because this is the only audio we have, I think, before $1 Million Quartet, but after Elvis's Jackie Wilson. So this is the first audio we have of Elvis doing that version of "Don't Be Cruel."
True.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That it's awesome. It's great to see, or hear this version that like right away he seemed to incorporate Jackie Wilson's vocals
sort of
on the
parody
song.
of Elvis, in his own show. I think that's really cool. And the version of Long Tall Sally is very solid. Like, it's very comparable to the other live versions that we have of it, recording-wise.
Branching around the stage, hair is coming down over his face.
Overall, like, there's nothing groundbreaking, shocking, surprising in terms of the audio, of the content of the performances themselves. They're just really nice to have. So now the thing that's worth mentioning, though, is that we know from write-ups that his set list was about 30 minutes long. So we're missing quite a bit. And you can sort of comparing it to the final Hayride performance and maybe going back to the Tupelo shows in September. You can sort of try to work out in your head, like, okay, what else might have been in there? Seems probably likely that he probably did I Got a Woman, almost certainly did Hound Dog. Wouldn't surprise me if Love Me Tender was in the set list because the movie was out. Paralyzed, probably most likely. And then the rest you could imagine probably like just pull from a list of a half dozen others that he is known to have done around that time. Stuff like
I Was the One, maybe?
I Was the One for sure, probably. Love Me, When My Blue Moon Turns to Gold Again.
Blue Suede Shoes?
Maybe Blue Suede Shoes. Like I said, you could probably throw down about a half dozen titles that could potentially be as part of the full concert. But it's definitely not the full show, but we just have sort of a glimpse of near the beginning for those first two songs. And then there's definitely a tape break before it picks up again partway through Don't Be Cruel, which Elvis typically did fairly early in the set list. So,
Cool. But, what was I going to say? I guess he didn't have enough tape to cover the whole show.
Yeah, presumably. So, I'm glad that we have it. I'm glad that we have both versions of it. I would hope that if Memphis Recording Service, I know that they're taking orders for a physical, tangible version of their edit of it, that's been much more processed. I think the responsible thing to do in my mind would be to include a polished up version of the original audio, for historical preservation's sake. But as mentioned, Greg uploaded it out there online. I know that he's made that available. So if you want to go hear that, it is available. I'll just say folks, just check it out. It's out there and it's available. So I will
nice.
say Memphis Recording Service stuff, not technically available in the United States on like our streaming services and stuff like that. You would have to import that. So
Yeah, I got it here in Canada.
yes, indeed. Yeah. So
cool. Yeah, I don't know what FTD or where they would put it out. It'd have to be some kind of a package from the 50s, like a live 50s thing that they can throw it onto, but they're not going to release it as is because it's only like, 12 minutes, everything?
yeah, I don't suspect that Sony will probably end up doing much with this because they would have to come up with a product for it where it would fit in. So it's a nice little addition to the Elvis canon. So
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, that's our episode for the week. Let us know what you guys think of the audio that was just released, and how can they do that?
yeah, shoot us an email, tcbcast@gmail.com. And if you like what we do and want to support the show, you can do that over at patreon.com/tcbcast.
All right. Well, until next time, it's a hot time in Florida.
And a rainy night in Georgia.
You've been listening to the TCBcast, an unofficial Elvis fan podcast.
Someone must have stomped on his head with those blue suede shoes.
Thank you and good night.